The White House breaking their silence on the Hunter Biden pardon. Korean Jean-Pierre stepping out to the podium and coming up with new excuses for why Joe Biden lied for more than a year about it.
He wrestled with these circumstances, these changing circumstances ultimately. And the combination of that, the president changing his mind and issuing, certainly led to the president changing his mind and issuing this pardon. There has been some circumstances that have changed this, right? Republicans not letting up, saying they won't stop. They're going to continue to do this. I mentioned the recent Trump appointees of legal enforcement positions, right? That said during the campaign they would have, they were out for retribution, and so no reason to not take them for the word.
And look who's back. Barack Obama returning to the spotlight after tarnishing his legacy during the 2024 campaign. The former president sounding very bitter over what happened.
Since total victory is impossible and the country politically split down the middle, the result is a doom loop of government gridlock, even greater polarization. When I mentioned to a few friends that our foundation would be hosting a forum on democracy and pluralism, I got more than a few groans and eye rolls, especially since, as far as they were concerned, the election proved that democracy is pretty far down on people's priority list.
Except for everybody voted, Kaylee, for the current president-elect, but they don't care about democracy at all.
Right, of course they don't. Yeah, everyone voted for 76 million people, more than that now. The most raw vote total count that any president that's Republican has gotten ever in history. So I'm pretty sure he has a mandate to lead. If I could just address Korean Jean-Pierre for a second. I had about 45 problems with her briefing, but I'll just pick two of them. She also miscited a poll. She said the circumstances changed about the Hunter Biden pardon. No, they did not. They said after the plea deal, they would never pardon him. The only circumstance that changed was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris losing, not becoming president, not having Democrats continue in that role. Then she says he decided this weekend, except we have NBC reporting that they discussed the pardon as far back as June and said publicly they would not do it despite having internal turmoil. She should be livid at the president for putting her in this position, and the press should be livid. But instead, like delicate little wallflowers, they sat back, allowed her to mislead them. Where was the Jim Acosta, the Caitlin Collins, the ferocious roar of the press corps? It wasn't there today because they don't do their jobs.
So, Jesse, Hunter Biden knows way too much about the big guy to be serving any time in federal prison. It was never a question that he was getting a pardon from his dad. Never.
No, never. And if Kamala had won, she was going to pardon him. Mm-hmm. That was the deal.
Is that the circumstance that has changed?
That was the circumstance that had changed, is that she lost. Because if she had won, it would have been more graceful and more acceptable for her to do it. Because he could have said, hey, I said I wasn't going to do it. She did it. And she would have looked like the bigger person to have mercy on him. But she lost. And the other circumstance that changed was because they tried to cut a deal in the summer, which was basically a pardon. That deal that judge sniffed out as ridiculous, that was blanket immunity. So that's also a circumstance that changed. But Hunter was never going to serve time. It's obvious. But I have to talk about Barack Obama. Hussein, sorry. He is saying that someone else has been polarizing. He was the most polarizing president almost in decades. Racially polarizing. If you look at the charts in Gallup, blacks and whites started hating each other. Blacks started hating the country. It just became horrible. Class starts with the bitter clingers, and then at the end, Occupy Wall Street. He starts pitting rich people against poor people and back and forth, one percenters, all that stuff. We all started hating each other. And then he talks about weaponization, all this stuff. It was his Justice Department that spied on a Fox News reporter. Mm-hmm. It was his CIA that spied on the Senate. It was his administration that spied on Trump, that entrapped Flynn, that weaponized the federal government. So now all of a sudden, when everyone's mad that he got caught and did this, now they want to just throw a blanket pardon over everybody in D.C. That's not how it's done. This guy needs to look himself in the mirror.
And it was his IRS who went after Tea Party activists as well.
Bingo.
So, Harold, does the former president, Barack Obama, need a mirror to see where all of this divisiveness and the doom loop came from?
Well, I'm not. I said last week, I don't think that Democrats ought to be focused on listening to people who voted for Kamala Harris. Presumably, President Obama did, and Vice President or Governor Walz, the vice presidential nominee, did. I think the real issue here is Democrats should be in the first month of what I call a 6-month travel the country and listen to Americans in blue and red states who didn't vote for Kamala Harris, who may have had some of the concerns that Jesse was expressing. I don't fully agree with everything Jesse said, but clearly there's an element or elements of what Jesse just shared that are true. If we don't try to figure out how this upending has happened, we being Democrats, the Republican Party, as I grew up in Congress, is no longer that Republican Party. The Democratic Party that I grew up in Congress is no longer that Democratic Party. Donald Trump did
and at
something.
least one of those is a good thing.
Well, in your mind,
Yeah.
Donald Trump, I just want to just state the facts for 1 second, Joey. Donald Trump did something truly amazing. You were sitting here one of those days we had this conversation. He has made working class Americans the party of Donald Trump. It's not the Republican, it's Donald Trump. And if Democrats are serious about finding ways in which to resonate with that group again, they better get an answer on the border. We better get an answer on inflation. We better get a better answer on how to stimulate and invigorate the economy in parts of the country that are not experiencing like we are here in New York and some of the great islands in the country where prosperity is happening. So enough of this, more of getting out and listening to voters is what Democrats need to be doing.
So, Joey, it doesn't seem like President Biden is interested in finding this out, given that pardons to your son and then lying about it for a year doesn't really help you gain any traction with the American people who are a little tired of being told something's not happening when they're seeing it in front of their eyes.
What did Bush say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I don't know. You know, he screwed that one up. Any of us that are surprised by this, from a man who spent 50 years plagiarizing and lying, who tried to, I guess he couldn't run the first time for president because they found out he was plagiarizing speeches and papers from people. I mean, the man has spent his entire career doing this kind of thing. And I guess the only outrage should just be, are you guys really going to just keep accepting it? Like, as a party, as the Democrat Party, are you really just going to keep accepting it from your candidates and from your leaders? Listen, I love to go back to what KJP said about circumstances have changed and who the president's nominating. I have no idea what the strategy was with Matt Gaetz. Was he this really, outstanding playing chess Trojan horse to get the ire off everybody else? Was it a very serious nomination? I tend to think in the beginning it was. And what it signaled was there are a lot of people in D.C. who will have Donald Trump's back more so than he felt Jeff Sessions did. But there are only a few people who would spend their entire political collateral going after Trump's enemies, and Matt Gaetz is one of them. And I think this shows that they understand that this next administration probably will have an element of, you came after me, I'm coming after you. I mean, maybe the big guy will pardon himself before he leaves office. I don't know.
Hey, you never know. Maybe his brother, too. We'll see.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.